Minority Whip Congressman Eric Cantor from my home state of Virginia joining Squawk Box this morning, and here's what he had to say in response to what the Obama administration is doing for or to business.
Everybody I talk to in the business world is plagued by the uncertainty, and the uncertainty, frankly, starts in Washington.
Representative Cantor highlights one of the key issues his colleagues in the Senate face when they come back into session just 45 minutes from now. Have the very laws that they've passed to help the economy actually hurt it by creating too much uncertainty and preventing business from hiring. Dan Mitchell of the Cato Institute joins us now, as does Christian Weller at the Center for American Progress. Guys, good to see you. Dan, I'm going to start with you. For a long time, there was the question out there was, boy, the economy doesn't seem to be getting that much better, even though the White House and Congress have done all of these things. But it seems to me when I read more and more commentary, the question is now shifted, or the statement has shifted. Is the economy not doing better because of all the things that Washington has done?
Oh, I think that's correct. The way I think of it is that the economy is like a ship trying to sail in the right direction, but government is a giant anchor holding it back, and the politicians are like throwing additional anchors overboard, whether it's so-called stimulus, government-run health care, potential of cap and trade, Obamacare. These are all things that punish people for being successful, and so it's no surprise that the economy is not doing that well. We're making ourselves more like France, so of course we're having French-style economic numbers.
Christian, if I were a betting person, I'd bet you don't think that. What do you say?
I don't think so. If you look at the last year and a half, the government has done the right things. We've stabilized the financial markets, the economy, and the labor market has turned around clearly in 2010. But the big issues here, financial regulatory reform, healthcare reform, but also the energy debate, they're intended and they will work as intended once they're passed by creating more transparency, more competition in monopolistic markets, thereby leveling the playing field between consumers and companies, thereby creating more efficiency, better outcomes for the economy, faster growth.
You said that clearly the employment situation has turned in 2010. You are satisfied, or these numbers suggest to you that the employment situation has turned in the United States?
Well, the situation has clearly turned. We're creating jobs. We have created over 600,000 jobs in the private sector in the first 6 months of this year.
Why isn't it better?
Positive territory. But the other part is, well, part of it is here that we still have this anchor around our neck, to use Dan's metaphor, but it's a private sector anchor, and that is the high debt levels that private households have faced. And that's something we have to address on the financial regulatory side. We have never really fully dealt with the problem of a lot of bad debt. The various programs that the Bush administration, the Obama administration put in place just simply aren't working fast enough to reduce that debt. And I think that's ultimately what's holding it back. So what that means is you have to step in, do more to create more investment. I think the certainty created with financial regulatory reform, with healthcare reform, energy reform will ultimately get us to this point.
Let me jump in here. Dan, is there any real surprise that there would be business uncertainty, as there was in 1986 when the last big tax reform bill came through? Any real surprise that there should be uncertainty when we move from an era of relatively laissez-faire government to one where there is a more active government presence in the economy and in society? Is there any real surprise that there should be uncertainty as we move from a period where we spent and borrowed, took on great debt as households and so forth, to a period where there's some more austerity coming? Isn't this what we should expect in a period of transition?
Well, first, if you're saying that we had laissez-faire policies under Bush, you must be on some good drugs that I want to borrow, because Bush was a big spending interventionist, just like Obama. That's one of my complaints with Obama.
He was a deregulatory president.
No, he wasn't. We got Sarbanes-Oxley. We had all sorts of new regulation and new intervention under Bush. I would happily go back to Bill Clinton. We had lots of good free market policies other than the 1993 tax hike under Clinton. You see, there are two issues. There's certainty and uncertainty. There's no question the private sector is concerned about the specter of higher tax increases next year, about the possibility of some crazy cap and trade legislation. But certainty isn't a good thing either if it means the certainty of government-run health care and wasteful government spending. So I don't care whether it's the threat or the reality. Government policy is moving in the wrong direction, and of course,
but if you look at the polls, what business is really concerned about is sales at this point. But certainty certainly matters, or the predictability of the future in the various bills that have moved forward: healthcare, financial regulatory reform, also the energy legislation that is at least being discussed at this point, is meant to make the world a little bit more predictable, increase competition, increase transparency in these markets, and thereby preventing some of these disasters we have seen in the past. But ultimately, what it is intended to do and will do is shine a greater spotlight on the market.
Why doesn't the individual investor feel confident enough, if all of this uncertainty is being addressed, to get back into the market? Look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The gentleman we just interviewed said there's tremendous amount of uncertainty surrounding what government is going to do, and therefore the individual investor does not trust Wall Street. Why isn't what you're saying playing out in a more positive way?
If you look at the individual investors, there's a number of factors, but one of them is just simply the shock of the last few years sits too deep in their bones. I mean, clearly, you look at behavioral economics, that's certainly holding them back. They're worried that another crash may come, however irrational their thinking is. I don't think you can really extrapolate from what the individual investors are saying, the retail investors, about what it says about Washington. You look at the institutional investors, they have gone back in, they have done gangbusters, and clearly the market is booming, and that says something about what the smart money thinks the economy will do in the next few years.
Dan, we're going to take your waving your head back and forth as that you don't agree, but we got to wrap it up. Dan, Christian, thank you so much.
Dan looks worried there. Dan looks worried.
Oh, Dan.
Yeah, we're right back at the 10,000 mark is what Dan just said.